These colourful items are embroidered postcards sent by soldiers at the front back to their families during the First World War. They were traditional in France, and British soldiers would often buy them when they were posted to the continent. The cards in our collection tend to be blank. This is because although they have space for writing, the original envelopes that they were sold in were extremely delicate. This meant that soldiers would write a long accompanying letter and then pop them together in the same envelope. The sentiments expressed on these cards themselves are brief, but they show that the soldiers were clearly thinking about their mothers. Troops often weren't paid very much, so the fact that they were spending part of that salary on these cards expressed the importance that they put in these relationships.
In a similar way to embroider postcards, we can get a feel for historical family relationships and traditions around motherhood through letters and cards. The Hogarth and Capstick collection at Craven Museum contains over 1,000 letters and postcards from a family in Settle who kept all their correspondence between around 1900 and 1970. The collection includes cards from sons and daughters keeping in touch with their mothers and mothers to their children. This is a selection of birthday and greeting cards to mothers in the Hogarth family. Messages show great fondness, including one which reads, "A very happy birthday and blessings all through life. I gladly wish a mother so lovable as you." There are also letters detailing aspects of women's lives, such as childbirth. This letter from Francis Hogarth to his mum and dad was written on the 7th of January 1941. Francis was a soldier during the Second World War and only had limited days of leave. Yet fortuitously, he was spending time with his wife on New Year's Day when their second daughter, Sheila, was born. His letter reads, "I had only just arrived when another little daughter arrived for us on New Year's Day about dinner time, so it was a proper New Year's gift. But I'm pleased to say both Kath and baby are doing fine." Photographs in the museum collection also offer a window into family life. One of the photo collections at Craven Museum was donated by the Keston family. Charles and Smith Keston owned a photography studio in Skipton between 1901 and 1926. They took photographs of their family, special events and local Dales scenery. This photograph shows Marie Firth, who was married to Charles. She owned a milliner's or hat shop in Skipton. Charles took many photos of Marie with her sister, mother and his mother, giving us a glimpse into their family life. This memorial sampler represents a very poignant moment in family life. A sampler is a piece of embroidered material, traditionally used to showcase a person's needlework skills. By the 1800s, they were often used as an educational tool at school for students to practice their embroidery. They were also used as decorative pieces around the home. As samplers were usually made by women, they offer us a very unique insight into their lives. They frequently contain texts such as moral messages, mottos, or biblical verses, which give us an idea about what was important to the sewer. This sampler was sewn in memory of Sarah Birtwistle, who died in 1885 at the age of 3 years old. The text reads, "This lovely bud, so young and fair, called hence to join a better home in paradise above." The caretaken and beautiful imagery used alongside the moving message shows us one of the ways women dealt with grief, particularly around the loss of a child.
Mortality rates and the dangers of childbirth were a very prevalent part of women's lives. In this oral history interview, Lucy Elliott, who was born in 1920, remembers her mother giving birth at home.
We had a little front room, what we called a front room, and the bed had been brought down so my mother could give birth. Most people, working class people, had the children at home as opposed to going into hospital. You had to be really in need of a doctor to have him attend you for childbirth. It had to be a bit dicey.
Childbirth has always played a pivotal role in the lives of women. Childbirth was often fraught with risk, partly because the medical advancements that we can take for granted today were not yet available. Death in childbirth was not uncommon, and child mortality rates were very high. However, after the immediate danger of childbirth was over, a new member of the family was something to celebrate. In the past, as it is today, a christening would be a joyous coming together of family, as well as a religious rite. This christening gown belonged to Muriel Jane Bailey, who was born in Long Preston in 1895. Her granddaughter recently donated the gown to Craven Museum, alongside a substantial costume collection, mostly belonging to other women in her family.
But motherhood wasn't the only aspect of women's lives. Margaret Robertson, who recorded an oral history at the museum in 1994, reflects on how her mother worked before and after she was born.
She worked at the grocer's shop. Occasionally she served, but she was mostly the bookkeeper. So good training for being bookkeeper for my father when she came here. Because she kept all his books in beautiful copperplate handwriting. Her handwriting was beautiful. Both my parents were very clever in their own way, but they hadn't had the educational opportunities that came later. They were both extremely bright.
Heather Longbottom came to the museum earlier this year to give us an oral history, which focused greatly on her experiences as a young girl during the Second World War. She was born in Empsey in 1941, and during her interview, she reflected on the struggles that her mum Jean had gone through, living alone with 2 young children as her husband was away fighting in the war. These photos were also donated by Heather and show her mum and her sister together during this period. Despite these challenges, Heather fondly remembered the happy childhood that her mother's hard work had allowed her to have.
There was one about Christmas and how she'd celebrated it with us. We were up early and opening our stockings and thrilled to bits with, and the toys she'd made, and I can remember those toys. She was brilliant. She was always sewing, knitting, pulling out wool from jumpers, to get wool.